Okay, we are recording the meeting now. Miss J will be running the vast majority of this meeting, going over last week's material a little bit with you guys. What we are doing next week has already been posted. I think Mr. Ficker is going to be on momentarily to talk about that. But Miss J is going to be going over last week's material with you guys. If you have yet to turn it in, it is now late, so please let's get on it. You had, again, 3 different assignments to get done. One of them was just a weekly review. That should be the easiest one. I want to take just a quick moment about weekly reviews. Mr. Ficker and Miss J have done this all throughout the year, so their students should be well versed in it. Mine, not so much. Let's make sure we understand that weekly reviews, you're supposed to kind of tell us what you were understanding, clearly understanding, what you feel like you've got down, especially from the previous week's material or even the weeks prior to, especially if you were confused, you want to let us know that, hey, now I get it. But that second column needs to be things that, hey, I'm still not sure about what's going on with this. So for example, this week's material is all about, the roles, the powers of the president. That's what Miss J is going to be going over with you guys right now is kind of that type of stuff from Article 2. If you were really confused and saying, I don't understand what head of state is, or I don't understand what, impeachment is, or I don't understand what an executive order is, those forms, the weekly review forms, are there for you to kind of let us know so that on days like today, we can clear things up. So please make sure that you're not just writing things, because I had people writing things like House and Senate. Well, what about the House and Senate? Kind of give us something to go on so we can answer those questions more thoroughly, be a little bit more specific. But for those of you that just keep on kind of filling out the left-hand side and saying, I've got everything, when clearly based upon your grade and work completion, you don't, please make sure that you're kind of letting us know, because it allows us to elaborate a little bit and make these sessions a little bit more valuable to your time. Okay. Just kind of my little 2 cents about that form, and to those on this call that are my students on my class list, I have not given you a weekly review every week, but Ficker and Miss J have been very consistent about that. So their students probably already know what I'm talking about. Mine, I'm just trying to make sure you understand that will be a more regular occurrence this time around, because I am kind of concerned that maybe you are having some issues and everything. And since I don't see you, it's a good way for you to kind of let us know, hey, I'm a little confused on the following concepts. So be specific, fill them out, take them seriously, and don't skip over them, because they're an easy grade. They're by far the easiest grade. It's just kind of telling us what you need. So just my 2 cents. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Miss J. Miss J, you're all set.
Alrighty, did you want to go over the assignments, Mr. Ficker? Do you want me to do that, or?
Well, let's see what's posted. I can, if you want me to, I can do that.
Okay.
I'll do that right now. Okay, everybody, I'm sharing my screen with you. So this week's stuff, which starts today, these are the assignments that are due the February 2nd. Okay, Ms. J has put a nice list of assignments together for you. Okay, so the Zoom class and the exit ticket will be done today. And then the assignments that you'll work on your own are the modern presidential powers. Okay, this is a, hold on a second. Okay, so this is where you're going to look at all of these powers of the president. The president is commander in chief. Okay, you should know what that means. If you don't know what that means, then look it up and then give me an explanation of the power here. Okay. Then what you want to do is do a Google News search. Got the link for it here. And then you can put up like, you can use Biden if you want, but I don't think you're going to have much luck with Biden because he's only been president for a week. Okay, so I'm going to type in Trump Commander in Chief. Okay, and it's going to search all of Google News and Trump in the military, how Trump has already been removed as Commander in Chief. These probably aren't going to help you, but you want to look at a way that the president, doing something as president that demonstrates that he is the Commander in Chief. Okay, you probably have to scroll down because a lot of this is going to be about the president leaving, or you could even take out Trump and put in President Commander in Chief. Okay, Biden inaugurated, he's now Commander in Chief. So those are the kind of things, executive order on enabling all qualified service Americans to serve their country in uniform. That's actually a good one. That is an executive order that was given by Biden a couple of days ago that says that anybody can serve in the military. There was a ban on transgendered people in the military under the Trump administration. That's been lifted by executive order by the Biden administration. So then you would go and find a, if you find that article, you copy and paste the link, read the article, okay, copy and paste the link of the article in here, and then give us like a 2 to 3 sentence summary of what's in the article and how it relates to Commander-in-Chief. Okay, it says provide a 3 to 4 sentence summary of the current event that mentions why you believe this illustrates the presidential power. Okay, so there's 10 or 12 listed here. You want to do a Google News search for all of those. Okay, don't copy and paste stuff from the article into your summary. The summary has to be your own words. Okay, and then Ms. J has put in a assignment about the Electoral College, or was that Mr. V?
That was actually
Mr.
me.
Okay, sorry, Mr. V. I didn't mean to slight you there. So,
Do you want me to explain this?
that would be fantastic.
Okay,
If
you
need
can
to
still share
click,
your
just-
screen. Never mind.
Sorry, I clicked it right before you said it.
No, you're fine. All right, so I'll share mine then. Let's see. Not yet, anyway. Sorry, folks. I know everybody's upset about this delay. Okay, so on the classwork here, under the assignments, you had assignment 2, Electoral College. The actual assignment, there is a YouTube video that explains the Electoral College. So I go through the bits and pieces about the Electoral College and why that map on election night is lit up red and blue all the way through, because they're counting Electoral College votes specifically. So that video is there to educate you about it. There is also this Google Doc right here, the 2024 presidential candidates. That's right, we're already starting. It doesn't go away. So yeah, Biden literally is 1 week today in office, and we're already talking about 4 years from now who's going to run. Now, what I did is I went and I put together a list of people that could possibly declare. And of course, there's way more than this, but these are the people who might be thinking about running. Now, let's say Joe Biden runs for re-election. That would mean that, if he has a fairly successful time in office, none of these guys underneath are going to say, oh, hey, I'm going to run too. Maybe 1 or 2 will challenge him in the primary, especially if somebody, I could see a Bernie Sanders just doing it again just for fun. If he's still, alive and kicking, because he is getting up there. But bottom line is Joe Biden is the odds-on favorite to run again. But then again, he will be 81 years old when that eventuality comes around. He may say, ugh, I'm 81, I'm done, I'm out. So these other people underneath are the Democrats that could possibly run. And then, of course, there are the Republicans. Donald Trump is still eligible to run, as are everybody listed here. So what I'm asking you to do is look through this list of candidates. You can choose Democrats, you can choose Republicans, you can choose a mixture of both. It doesn't matter. And what I want you to do is research at least 5 of them. So you're going to choose 5 from that list, and you're going to put their name, in this document here. So let's say I did Marco Rubio. I'm going to type in Marco Rubio here. And then this little synopsis here kind of tells you, hey, I want you to have about 3 to 4 well-developed sentences to explain why you think this person might be able to win the Electoral College, why they might win the White House. So not only are you going to tell me who they are, okay, so it tells you up here, research who they are, where they're from, what political jobs they've had, excuse me, and what political experience they would bring to the White House. You know, what are they bringing with them to the White House as a potential president? Why would their name make this list? Okay, and then you're going to decide based upon your knowledge of the Electoral College system, could they win? You know, and your answer could be there is no chance this person could win, but show me that you understand the reason that they can't win is because they are a House member from Rhode Island and have zero name recognition, or they are the governor of Hawaii and nobody from Hawaii has ever won, you know, and you can say, hey, Hawaii only has 4 votes in the Electoral College. So again, that's kind of what you're doing here is you're explaining for these 5 people that you chose, why you chose them, who they are, and whether or not you think they can win the Electoral College. If you have questions on that or what Ficker was talking about, you can certainly hang back at the end, but I want to give Miss J plenty of time to do what she needs to do. So Miss J, take it away.
Thank you. So I am going to share my screen, and I made this into a Pear Deck because I get it. I'm in class also, so I know that times that it is hard to unmute yourself and talk, but this way you guys can still interact with the presentation a little bit. So if you could go to joinpd.com, and then this is the code QBHWAY, and that'll stay up on the screen at the bottom. I will give you a minute to join. But like I said, this is just a way for you guys to be able to interact a little bit more with it. You can just open it on another tab on your computer and it will follow along with the presentation, or you can put it on your phone, whichever you feel would work best for you. I see that I have 1 student connected. I'll give it just another minute or so. Okay, I'm gonna get started. The code should stay up. Yes, it's up in the right-hand corner. So you can connect at any point. You just gotta go to the joinpd.com and then type in the code. But I don't wanna go to, I wanna make sure you guys get out of here on time. So starting off, we did the executive branch this week. And what a great way to get started on our unit of the president by starting off with the inauguration. But let's start off with who makes up the executive branch. As we know, we've got the president and the vice president. That's pretty self-explanatory. We know who they are. We read a lot about them. We hear a lot about them, but there's other people in the executive branch as well. There is the cabinet. So the cabinet are those officers that are appointed by the president. So when we are talking about the president's power of appointment, a lot of times what we're talking about is his cabinet. And these are the people that work as advisors to the president. The president, they're pretty smart people. They've got a lot of experience usually in dealing with the government, but they can't be, experts in everything. They can't be experts in transportation, agriculture, education, homeland security, all of the things that they've got to know. So these cabinet members are in charge of kind of advising the president in a lot of those roles. And then the cabinet members are also in charge of those executive departments. So those executive departments are the departments that the cabinet members in charge of. So let's say the Secretary of Education would be in charge of the Department of Education. Secretary of Defense works on top of the Department of Defense, things like that. Those are just the departments that hire even more people. They work on those issues that are being, that we have in our country, and it's just kind of the experts in those areas. And then after that, we've got independent agencies. And those are kind of the cool ones that we've got. Those are things like the CIA or the ones that you guys probably deal with honestly every day, the United States Post Office. So those are agencies that fall under the executive branch, but have very specific roles in society. And a lot of times we will actually interact with those some more. And then the last group in the executive branch are the boards, commissions, and committees. And so those are just really specialized kind of departments that don't fall under those executive departments. For instance, one is the Endangered Species Program. It's something that it's necessary to have in our country, but doesn't fall under those executive departments. The executive branch has 4 million people employed in it. So it's a pretty big branch. I know, like, typically I make this mistake too. When I think of the executive branch, I think of the president, vice president, but there's actually quite a few people in the executive branch, and the president is kind of the head of all of that. And like I said, we started with the president, so we're going to dive right into that. We are on to our 46th president. Like I said, what a great way to kick off this unit with the inauguration. I said it was really exciting. I will probably always talk about the year that I got to student teach, and I got to see a pandemic, remote learning, the insurrection at the Capitol, all of these great historic events that I will be talking about for the rest of my career. But the one that I thought was exciting and actually kind of fun and great was having our first woman vice president, our first biracial woman vice president with Kamala Harris. So that was really cool. That was a cool, actually like fun historical moment. But yeah, we're on to number 46. So let's start off. You guys kind of looked at who could be president. And I put an excerpt from the Constitution, but I broke it down into just the 3 main points. You got to be a natural born citizen. So I know we talked about immigration and how a person can become a citizen, I think it was 2 weeks ago. But in order to be president, you have to be a natural born citizen. It means you have to be born here. You can't immigrate here from a different country and then become a citizen. Those people cannot be president. The only exception is if you are so happen to be born overseas or in a different country to American parents. So let's say your parents are in the military, they're stationed in Germany, you were born there, you were still born to American parents, you are a natural born citizen just because you were born in a different country. But that is like the only exception. Other than that, you have to be born here. You have to be 35 years old. That seems pretty young. Our youngest president so far has been John F. Kennedy at 43 years old. But they made 35 because when this was written in like 1787, the life expectancy was around 40 years old. So I highly doubt they really thought that we were going to see as people as old as we've got now serving as president. Joe Biden, our newest president, is actually the oldest president at 78 years old. So that's kind of like a huge difference. But that's the age limit. And then the other qualification is you have to have lived in America for the past 14 years. You couldn't have lived abroad, lived in a different country, and then come back and like a year later been like, I'm going to run for president. You've had to have been here for the past 14 years. Okay, and then we looked at what are the president's powers? And so the president's powers are called, the ones that are called express powers, those are stated in the Constitution. And those are in Article 2 of the Constitution. And a lot of these are what you're going to be looking at your assignment for next week. And so the first one is Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. So this means the president is in charge of our armed forces. They can kind of decide when to move them, where to send them to, how to use them. But it is important to note that the president cannot declare war. That's Congress's job. That's one of the ways that the United States has really put those checks and balances and separation of power in. While the president can command those armed forces around, they can't actually declare war. Their next power is the power to make appointments. So like I said, we've got those cabinet members. The president gets to decide who's going to serve in those positions. Again, this is where we see another check and balance. The Senate has to approve the person that the president appoints to that position, but the president does get to decide who gets to serve there. They also get to appoint federal judges. If you think about the Supreme Court, they get to appoint a judge whenever there's a vacancy there, along with the lower federal courts. They also possess diplomatic powers. That's their next power. And diplomatic powers just means managing international relations. Work with other nations, other foreign leaders, because they get to sign those treaties, negotiate those treaties. The president's kind of the face of our country, so they work alongside those other leaders. One of their big powers from this is the ability to receive ambassadors. So we've got a picture of former President Obama meeting with an ambassador. So when a president meets with an ambassador, that's somebody that another country or nation sends. And when our president meets with them, that means that we as the United States recognize that nation. So that's like their big power in that, alongside the signing of treaties. The president also gets to grant pardon and reprieves. That's a big thing that we hear a lot about. I know we heard a lot about it in the news the past couple weeks, because on former President Trump's last night in office, he pardoned I think it was 73 people, and he also offered multiple reprieves. He pardoned a total of 143 people in his entire time as president. Two of them were rappers, Lil Wayne, Kodak Black, but a lot of also people who worked alongside of him, he pardoned as well for different crimes. That is a very normal thing for a president to do. I think Obama pardoned more people. I think he pardoned around 215. So that is a power that the presidents use often. And then lastly, the president's express power is given the State of the Union address. So the president every year, except for on years with the inauguration, they stand in front of Congress and they say, this is kind of what I want to get done. This is what we need to strive to do. And it's just a formal address that they give to Congress. And then we looked at the roles of the president. So this is what everyone did in the crossword puzzle. Thank you guys for reaching out when you had questions. I was happy to help, and I know there was some confusion. So I really appreciate everyone trying to work that out with me. But starting off, they are the chief executive. So execute just means to do. So if you think about it, the executive office is in charge of enforcing the laws. They make sure the laws are being done, they're being followed, they're executing those laws. And again, that's where that check and balance comes in. They get to, Congress gets to write the laws, the president or the executive branch gets to enforce them. And then they also are the chief administrator. This means that they are the head of the executive branch. So like I said, there's 4 million people in the executive branch. That's a huge, huge branch. And they're the chief administrator. If you think of an administration like a school, the principal is the head of all of it. There's a bunch of other staff underneath them, but the principal kind of heads it together. That's what it means to be a chief administrator, the head of that branch. President's kind of like our principal. He oversees that branch and kind of pulls it all together. The president is also the chief of state. So that means they represent the United States. A lot of times in different countries, they'll have somebody kind of represent the nations, ceremonially, and then they'll have somebody who is actually in charge of the politics behind it. In our country, that person is the president. They represent our nation. When you think of the United States, you think of the president, but also they have a lot of political power, like we talked about. So they're kind of rolled into one. Another role is the chief legislator, and they influence laws that are passed by Congress. And if you noticed, I capitalized influence. The president doesn't actually write the laws. I know that this was quite a bit of confusion. The president just kind of gets to influence. They're like, this is my agenda. This is what I would like to see done. But they don't actually write those laws. That's Congress's job. And then lastly, they are the chief diplomat. So like I said, diplomatic powers are one of their powers granted through the Constitution. So being the chief diplomat, they just work with those foreign powers. They receive ambassadors, they negotiate treaties, and they help shape foreign policy. So now we are going to go on to the portion where you guys are kind of gonna get to interact with the presentation. And so I have asked you a question, and each question is, does the president have the power? And then you guys get to select either yes or no. We get to look at it and then discuss it. And a lot of the things are things that we've been seeing either in the news or people just genuinely have questions about. So starting off, can the president grant themselves a pardon? And I will give you a second to respond, and then I can see the responses and we'll talk about what you guys think. So far, we've got 2 people saying no. Someone saying yes. All right. I'll give you another second and then we'll talk about that. Okay. No. As of right now, we are under the assumption that the president cannot grant themselves a pardon. Mr. Ficker always points out very well that the Constitution states he shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. When you grant something, you give it away. You can't grant yourself something. You have to give it to somebody else. The closest thing we have ever seen to a president not pardoning themselves, but receiving a pardon was Nixon. Nixon was involved in a scandal called Watergate. He was pretty sure, and correctly thinking so, that he was about to be removed from office. So he just removed himself, took himself out of the equation. And then after he removed himself from office, his vice president, Gerald Ford, became president, and Gerald Ford granted Nixon a pardon, saying that this was not a time for polarization. We should be focused on unifying and moving on from this. So I'm sure you'll hear that a lot about unification. But that was the idea there. And Nixon wasn't able to pardon himself. He had to get that pardon from a future president. But that's the closest thing we've seen. As of right now, no, a president cannot grant themselves a pardon. I see there was a question in the chat. Okay, that's all right. If you need anything clarified, let me know if your computer is going slow. Okay, our next question. Does the president have the power to declare war? I mentioned this earlier. Got 1 yes, 1 no. Okay, we got a couple yeses. No, the president does not actually have the power to declare war. So the person that said no, great job. I mentioned this earlier. The president does have the power to move about the armed forces and make decisions with that, but they can't actually declare war against another nation. That is Congress's job. And that's one of the separation of powers and checks and balances, to make sure that the president doesn't become too powerful, just decide all the time to go to war. Congress has to decide when we go to war. They vote on that. But then there's this question. Does the president have the power to send the National Guard to places in the United States? I'll wait for some responses. Yes. All right. So we've got some yeses. And you guys are correct. Yes, the president does have the power to send the National Guard to places in the United States. That is one of the powers that they have. We saw this at the Capitol building. That was actually the original call came from former Vice President Mike Pence. He called the National Guard in, but we saw them at some of the Black Lives Matter riots, and we saw it a lot down south with desegregation in the 1960s. Since the 1950s, when it was formally recognized, there was an act put in place that outlined how the president could send the National Guard to places in the United States. There's only been 12 times that the president has called the National Guard in. The National Guard has been called in by other state governors and local governments and stuff like that, which local governments have the power to do. However, the president's only done it 12 times, and majority of them were during the 1960s during desegregation. And then we have also got to see a couple times in present history where the president or the executive branch had to call the National Guard in. Okay, this is a big question in our society right now. Does the president have the power to enact a nationwide mandatory mask mandate? So that means, does the president get to tell everyone across all 50 states, no matter where you are in public, you have to wear a mask? Does the president have the power to do that? Got 2 yeses, 2 nos, 3 nos. All right. Well, we're going to keep going just so for the sake of time. No, the president cannot require everyone in all public places to wear a mask. I included a picture of Governor DeWine because he's actually going to decide Ohio's rules on that for mask mandates. President Biden has signed executive orders. He's made it about as strict as possible. He made it so that everyone on all federal property has to wear masks, such as the post office or federal parks or anything that is federally operated. He can say that you have to wear a mask, and he made it so on airplanes, trains, buses, you have to, but that's about the extent of that. After that, it goes back to state and local governments, and they decide in their own state. So our mask laws come from Governor DeWine. And then, does the president have the power to avoid Senate confirmations for appointments? We'll hear a little bit about this in the news, and this is a bit of a trickier question. So we've got 1 yes and 2 no's. So in a way, you both are everyone who answered was kind of correct. Remember, those appointments are those cabinet members or Supreme Court or federal judges. In regards to cabinet members, the president can avoid Senate confirmation for a very short period of time. It's 210 days. And that's when we'll get the term acting officials. And those acting officials just work in the position. They're kind of described as like a substitute teacher until a confirmed one comes in place. It'll take a while for these people to be confirmed to their positions, but they're still able to do their jobs in the meantime. However, they can't exceed those 210 days, or the president is overstepping his authority and they need to get somebody confirmed in there. So we'll hear some of Biden's acting secretaries up until they have the time to get confirmed in the Senate. And that's just kind of a thing that goes on. So if you hear about acting secretaries, that's what that means. They're not confirmed yet, but they will have to be voted on eventually within 210 days. And then our final question, does the president have the power to pass an executive order that contradicts or goes against the Constitution? Okay, a lot of no's very quickly. Great. You guys are correct. No. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. The judicial branch will usually step in, it'll make it to the Supreme Court, and they'll say, no, the president doesn't have that power. And that's just one of the great things about our checks and balances, and make sure that our executive branch does not get too powerful. So thank you guys so much for participating in that. You guys have an exit ticket to do, and you're all in luck because if you came to class, it is the questions that we went over at the end of the session. So if you paid attention, you listened to what we answered on those, you're gonna have a really easy time completing that exit ticket. And then it's on Google Forms, it's on the classroom, you'll be able to turn it in. Does anyone have any questions about any of those or anything clarified? Alrighty, well, I think we're gonna stick around for a couple minutes, but I know you guys have got to get on to your next class. If Mr. Ficker or Mr. V has anything else to add, I'm all done.
Ms. J, you rocked it. Well done.
Thank you.
Folks, if you have questions, you can stay behind, but you are free to go to your next class. Again, Ficker and I will be on email. We both have office hours, so if you have any clarifications necessary, please reach out.
Can Can Bernie Sanders mittens count as one of the 2024 candidates?
They're not old enough.
It should.